Okay, good morning. It is day 2 of learning Korean, and I feel very excited today. I'm now on my way to the usual cafe, where I'm going to get started learning Hangul. So I'm very, very, very excited. I'm like a little kid. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about learning Hangul. Now, when it comes to languages that use the Roman alphabet, such as English, or if I'm learning French, for example, where I already know the alphabet. Now, I have no interest in following the usual order of learning books, which is where they start with the alphabet and you go through every letter and then they give you exercises to see if you can pronounce them correctly. I think that it's much better to just use your knowledge of those letters and to start to associate those letters with the sounds they represent in the new language. And in my case, I always find that I develop pretty accurate pronunciation anyway. And I think that later on, if you find that you get feedback and you're making some of the sounds inaccurately, then you can go back and fine-tune. But I think in language learning, it's always better to fine-tune later, not to begin with those tiny details. But when it comes to a language like Korean or Japanese, where they have a totally different writing system, then it's a different story. Japanese has a syllabary, so it's like an alphabet, but where each letter represents a whole syllable. And Japanese has 2 of those, hiragana and katakana. And then it has kanji, which are Chinese characters. The characters are a whole different story, and so I think if you're talking about Mandarin, for example, that's a different discussion, where it's a language that exclusively uses characters. But languages that use alphabets or these type of systems, I think that you're always better off learning to read from the very beginning. For example, with Japanese, the first thing I did was learn hiragana. And it was the best thing I could have possibly done, because right from the beginning I started to get used to that writing system, and so I was always the strongest in my classes, for example at reading, because everybody else was relying on the Roman alphabet, and so even when we were learning hiragana, it became like a chore for them, and they just would rather rely on the romanization, and it becomes a big problem. Now, with Korean, I'm very, very excited. The first reason is that I have heard a lot about Hangul. A lot of people have spoken about this over the years in my circles, and they've talked about how it was invented, I believe, in the 1400s by a Korean king, with the specific goal of it being an efficient, effective writing system that was easy to learn and that was very effective. And I've heard that it's very interesting in how it functions, so I'm really, really curious just to finally find out, okay, how does it work? And just sort of discover that. But the second reason is, oh my god, so although I love Chinese characters, I really do, I love kanji in Japanese, and I couldn't imagine speaking or I couldn't imagine Japanese without them, honestly. However, it has to be said, it makes reading an absolute giant pain in the ass. Learning to read in Japanese is just something that will take a very long time, and there's no getting around it. If you're going to learn 2,000 to 3,000 Chinese characters, it doesn't happen overnight. And so the fact that Korean uses more or less an alphabet, a writing system, oh my god, it is going to make it so much easier for me to learn Korean, because at this stage in my language learning career, I learn a massive amount of my language content from reading, and so all I have to do is sort of master Hangul, and then I can access Korean books, I can access Korean reading content. Oh my god, it's so exciting, honestly, because unless you've learned a character-based system, it's hard to really understand what a undertaking it really is. So I cannot wait. Now, very important, am I going to try to master Hangul this week, for example? No. My goal is not to master it in the beginning. My goal is simply to familiarize myself with it enough to where I can start learning Korean from courses or whatever content using Hangul directly. So I do not want to learn anything with romanization. I don't even want to see the romanization. I just want to so when I learn hello, goodbye, my first words and so on, I want it to be in Hangul. And as I do that, I'm going to be writing them out by hand constantly. And so the mastery is going to come down the road through constantly reinforcing knowledge of those characters and those letters or whatever by learning. But I do not want to have to rely on romanization at all. So that's my goal. So I'm going to, as quickly as possible, learn to read and write all the letters, and then I'm going to dive into the language, and I cannot wait. So I'm going to get started right now.